Hi there. I'm Dr. Paul Looney. I'm a board certified psychiatrist and means I'm a medical doctor. I'm also a pastor of a church. And since I was a young kid, I was fascinated by science and the Bible and realized that there were significant challenges in bringing the two into harmony. And always believed that over time we would have more understanding that would help us bring things together. So, this video is for those of you who are curious about the biblical account of creation and what we've learned about the origins of the cosmos from science. We now think that the universe is about 13.79 billion years old, and there are other theories, but that's the most commonly accepted dating at this point. When we believe that the universe came to existence in what we call the Big Bang, where everything came from a point in space infinitely small and infinitely um, enormous in mass, which seems like pretty unbelievable, but that's what the evidence suggests. Now, there are some people who believe that the Big Bang happened without any divine intervention. That it was simply a result of natural causes, which seems unbelievable to me. I find it kind of unbelievable that God Himself could figure out how to bring everything that we experience in the physical universe into being in an instant in time. All the atoms, the molecules, the cosmos with its space and mass and gravity and all the constants that we enjoy in a physical universe. I just think, like, how did he figure out how to do that and bring it all about in a moment, the creation of light and matter and time? I I have no way of even grappling with that question. But suffice it to say, for me, it makes much more sense to think that a wise and powerful God figured it out rather than to think that it just was a fluke of nature or just a natural occurrence. But for those of you who kind of struggle with the biblical account, because if you take it quite literally as the uh, first verse of the Bible, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, as being stacked up very close to the creation of Adam and Eve, which seems to have been a little over 6,000 years ago, then it's very weird. And you actually have some people who do date the universe, believe that our Earth, at least in top of the universe, is actually only a little over 6,000 years old. That just boggles my mind to think that way because there's so much in geology and astronomy and physics that just is not compatible with a 6,000-year-old Earth. Um, Nonetheless, people believe that. So the way I think about it, and it was very fascinating to me a number of years ago when it was pointed out to me that in that first verse of the Bible that says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the earth was without form and void," that word that we translate "was" could also be translated "became." And it got me thinking that perhaps there was a gap between in the beginning and when the earth became formless and void. There's actually a term for this belief. It's called the gap theory. And the idea is that the cosmos came into being, as science tells us, 13.8 billion years, or give or take, and that that God developed the universe in a very methodical, stepwise fashion, ultimately bringing about the conditions for life and allowing life to begin on the planet in a very simple form, gradually building in complexity over time. That he was the author of that. Now, for me, the idea of uh, things developing in a beautifully complex and from simple to complex actually flies in the face of one of the laws of physics. It's what we call the law of entropy. It's this second law of thermodynamics that states that in a closed system, things go from order to chaos and from high energy to low energy. And so you would expect if the Earth were a closed system, the universe a closed system, that things would become more chaotic rather than more organized. And what we've seen on our planet is things getting increasingly organized, especially when it comes to life forms. So, be that as it may, my idea is that at a certain point, God did bring about life and allowed it to develop over time to the point that there were enormous creatures on the earth, including the dinosaurs, which have always held a fascination for me and my grandkids, my own boys. Just something about the dinosaurs that's very intriguing and compelling. But we know that at a certain point, the the dinosaur age was ended by a cataclysmic event that was so profound that it wiped out much of the life on Earth. Now, you could even imagine that it wiped out everything, and that could have been what happened when the spirit of the God hovered over the surface of the deep. That possibly, and this is all of this that I'm talking about, most of it is just conjecture. The way that I think about merging the two perspectives, and the way I think about it is that the way that the dinosaur age ended, we believe, was when a meteor, a huge meteor, collided with the Earth in the realm of right around the Caribbean Sea, and that collision was so profound that it covered the world with ash, blocking out the light of the sun and leading to the extinction of much of the life on Earth. It was a mass extinction event. What if that event happened simultaneously with Satan being cast out of heaven? That the meteor was a physical manifestation of that cataclysmic event when war in heaven ended with Satan being cast down and consigned to the earth. Now, and what if Satan was so angry that he decided to annihilate everything on the earth? It sort of is a screw you to God, kind of like a token of revenge on God, because he was well aware that this little gem of a planet, this little blue-green planet, was dear to the heart of God. And so Satan might have just, in his enraged state, laid waste to everything. Well, as God always does, he looks for ways to redeem terrible circumstances. He does it for all of us, and possibly he did it for the universe. That when the world was in chaos, without form and void of life, that the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the deep and perhaps did business with Satan, who once had been called Lucifer, the light, Prince of Light, and perhaps negotiated a deal, saying something like, "Okay, so here's the thing, Lucifer, Satan, you've been cast down. You do not have the power that you once held in the heavens, but you do have a certain amount of power here on the earth, and you've used it in destructive ways. Your proposition in waging war on me, if I'm speaking for God, was the idea that you could do a better job of ruling things, that you should not have to bow to my authority or wishes or will. And so it's my desire, if I'm God, to create creatures that have the capacity to learn firsthand what it is to have life on their terms, to be able to choose against God, and in fact, to choose your way, Lucifer, to choose to rebel, to choose um, to thumb their nose at God and have it their way. And so, if I'm God talking to Lucifer, I'm like, okay, so here's the deal. You're going to have certain abilities and tools at your disposal to win these creatures, these people, over to your side. And I'm going to try to woo them to mine. It's going to be a little unfair because you're going to have the ability to use pleasure to win them over to your side, and power, performance, prestige, a lot of things that these creatures are going to be attracted to, because being made in my image, they will be made for pleasure and for a certain amount of power and glory. But you're going to be offering it to them in a limited context, and I'm going to try to invite them to think bigger, broader, and more eternal. And in their life on the planet, they'll have a chance to taste life on their own terms and to taste life with me at the lead, at the helm. So, assuming they got all the details worked out, and again, this is kind of far-fetched, but maybe not. At that point, then, perhaps the six-day creation was simply God setting things back in order, banishing the darkness, let there be light, and there was light, and allowing there to be that, from the standpoint of the earth, the clearing of the skies, that the heaven, the waters above the heavens, and the waters below, the creation of the continents. Then on day 3, the emergence of vegetation and all kind of plant life. And on day 4, the sun and the moon and the stars began to show themselves as harbingers of the seasons, and at night and day. On day 5 was when the seas were once again teeming with life, and the birds of the air took to flight. Day 6 then allowed God to populate the land with all manner of living creatures and creeping things, and eventually, toward the end of day 6, creation of human beings, man and woman. Now, we believe from the evidence that human-like beings are pretty close to what we know now. Beings that were very human in their appearance and function have been around for maybe several 100,000 years. We don't know for sure, but imagine that day 6, God created for the first time after the extinction event creatures on the earth now that could walk without being attacked by T-Rex, and learn to adapt to life on the planet, and learn to hunt and to fish, to discover fire, and all the things that we know happened as humans developed over time. Their cranium, their brains getting bigger, the development of language and civilization. And suppose that from day 6 in the creation account, there is another big gap between day 7 when God rested and the next chapter when God created Adam, creating a particular spot on the earth that was guarded from devastation, that was guarded from other human beings, that was bordered by rivers, and where Adam could experience life on the planet in a fresh way. What if Adam was not necessarily the first man, that there were tons of other men and women on the planet before him, but he's the first one to be infused with the Spirit of God? Like, what if time was ripe for God to put a man on the planet that he formed from the dust, created particularly that he could breathe into his nostrils the breath of life and man would become a living soul. A soul, and having a soul that was in some ways different than all the souls that had come before, all the humans that had been before, because this particular man, Adam, had the Spirit of God in a fresh way. Eve, likewise, being made created from Adam, was also infused with this same Spirit. The reason I think that this makes sense is because when, after a little period of time after the fall, Cain kills his brother Abel, we know there's already cities, there's civilization. And we know that civilization doesn't pop up like that. Adam and Eve themselves were very, very rudimentary in their lifestyle. First, just being tillers of the soil in a beautiful place where they really didn't have to work very hard to get fruit. But then later, of course, Abel kept sheep. But imagine that once they got kicked out of the garden, they were in contact with other human beings that could also share information about raising a crop or tending sheep. And that when Cain was cursed by God for killing his brother, his fear was that other humans would kill him if they knew what he had done. And God says, so I'm going to put a mark on you so that people will know that they should not kill you. So where did all these people come from? Well, in my mind, they were there long before Adam and Eve were birthed in a particular special way. And they became the sons of God in a fresh way. That if you look at the trajectory from then, even Cain's children and his descendants were decidedly different in direction than Abel's descendants. Cain's descendants actually were infected with power and performance, and they did some amazing things from a human point of view, whereas Abel's children, his descendants, were godly, but they didn't do much of note until we get to Noah, who by that time in human history, even though God had put Adam and Eve and their descendants into the mix, it was not enough to turn the tide in a good way. And God actually repented that he had made man on the earth. If you recall my biblical account, that Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, but pretty much everybody else was not well. And so God, once again, gets a fresh start. There's another gap in the story where God pretty much wipes out everybody except Noah and his descendants. Now, you could propose that there were plenty of other civilizations that were not part of that flood that, from the biblical account, sounds like it's worldwide. I don't know. But the idea is that once again, God is trying to redeem a pretty broken planet. And here we are again, of course, very broken. But I don't know if my musings will be of help to you, but I do think it's very important for us to withhold judgment on this idea that that science and faith are incompatible, and believe that when we actually can step back from it, when we enter eternity from our very limited perspective on the planet, whether you're a scientist or a theologian, you don't know very much. We're pretty ignorant. God says, as far as the heavens are above the earth, so are my thoughts above yours. So my thoughts obviously are woefully inadequate, but if you like this idea or don't like it, I'd love to hear your views in the comments. And if you want to subscribe to my channel, I'd love that. Like the video, whatever. I love you. Take care.